Welcome to the first governance call of June 20th. We're really happy you're here. Let's take a look at what we have on the agenda for this session. This call is going to be very focused on notary issues. Typically, we have proposals and we have working group updates, but on this call, there's not a lot of that. So we're going to really start out focused on the notaries. And for you notaries, we're going to go over the SLA review that we've been in progress for the last couple of weeks. We'll talk about where we're pulling the numbers from. We'll talk about the timelines for this, give you a chance to ask us any questions or clarify as we're going through this, and then just make sure that this is working for you as a process. After that, we're going to deep dive a little bit into the application review. So if you are a notary and you wanted to sign more applications or you want to be more involved, this is a quick, let's review how you would go into the registry, how you would find open applications, and what does that process look like. For trust and transparency on the working group update, RG will walk us through a brief update on the retrievability and the progress in bold. For proposals, there's no new updates, so we'll be pointing you to GitHub to leave comments on the existing ones, as well as leave any feedback that you might have. And for discussions, we're going to talk about Slack, what's appropriate on Slack boards, what's not appropriate, where to find comms if you have any questions, and really how that process works. There's going to be a lot of time on the end of this call, so if you have any topics that you'd like to add, feel free to shoot a hand up as we go, or at the very end on that discussion, if there was anything we didn't cover that you'd like to bring up, there'll be plenty of time for that as we go. So as a quick refresh, this is the June 20th. I want to point out that the next call would be on a 2-week cycle, July 4th. That falls as a major holiday in North America, so we're not going to have a call on that day. So as just a quick refresher, there's no governance call on July 4th. So the next governance call after today will be on July 11th. Make sure that you're tracking that. And this Google Calendar is updated, so there should be no confusion, and I'll post the day before. But just as a quick, friendly reminder, no governance call on July 4th. We post this agenda 2 weeks in advance, so if there's any topics you want to see, please feel free to add it as always. And we're your friendly governance team, so if there's anything you need from one of us, feel free to reach out. If you're not sure who to reach out to, you can always ping me, and I'll be happy to route you to the best support lines to get you what you need. So with that, I'm going to turn the floor over to Lucas or Simon. They're going to give you a quick announcement on what we have as far as the next survey.
Yeah, thanks, K-Ray. Hey, everyone. Just a quick announcement. The governance team is preparing to send out the June survey in order to gather some feedback from the community regarding how we're currently doing during the fil-plus quality phase. We'd really appreciate you all taking some time to give us your input, so please look out for the survey. We'll be sending it out on Slack. This survey will just show us how aligned the community is with the overall program. Essentially, this information is going to help us understand what direction the program should be going towards and how we can improve it. Again, all of your inputs are incredibly important and will help shape the overall program, so please make sure you take some time to filling it out. Thank you, and the survey should be going out by the end of this week.
Rock. Thanks, Simon. Appreciate that. All right, notaries on the call. Let's dive into some things that are really relevant to your world right now. So first off, I wanted to talk about translations. So right now, when we have this call, we're obviously communicating in English. As I've reached out to some of you directly, some of the feedback that I've heard is, hey, I don't always come to the live calls because I'll watch it on YouTube because I can enable subtitles and see what I'm reading as we go through the language. So I'm going to start taking a pulse in addition to some of those surveys on how helpful would it be to have live translation on the call. So I'm currently scoping vendor services that essentially provide subtitles to a live Zoom call. So as we're doing this live, there would be that subtitle option. There's a lot of technical hurdles that we're overcoming as well as use cases. So I'd be really keen to get your feedback on this. I think what I'll do is, since there's going to be a lot of people watching this on YouTube, I'll probably ask in our notaries channel, how helpful would this be? Is this a service that you'd like to see? And as you can see on this screenshot, what I did was just copy this into Google Translate. It's not always relevant. It doesn't always flow. So we're thinking about this top of mind as a way to make sure that notaries from all regions and all spoken languages have a way that they can communicate and participate, since a lot of this call does happen live, where we really index off like who's really giving us the feedback. So I'll pause, and in addition to asking this on Slack in the coming days, if anybody on the call has thoughts, please let us know or comment in chat right now. All right. In chat, I see a lot of emojis of hands up. I think this is a good thing, and thumbs up. So I'll be sure to really look into this. I'll keep you updated and make sure that we get the languages in here. And the goal is, again, to make sure that this is not just a one-way communication, but we could really get your input live on a lot of these topics and make sure that they're landing for you. So I'll keep you updated as we continue scoping this, and I appreciate that feedback as we go in chat. Thank you. All right, Notary SLA. Hey, so in chat, I just dropped the link to Airtable. Feel free to go sign that now or anytime on the call. But I wanted to kind of speak a little bit on how we're taking this data and really putting it to use. So if you look in this Airtable form that we post every couple of times that we have these governance calls, really the goal is that we're collecting a few bits of information. One is who's coming to these calls. We really stress that this notary governance call is a way to kind of keep all community issues on top of mind for you. But it's also a way for you to kind of show like, hey, I'm active, I'm participating, I have a vested stake. So when you fill this form out, we track, hey, I came to this governance call on this date, on this session time. And then also what we're asking is that you fill out every week is your self-reported hours. And this lets us a way to say like, hey, where is this notary spending their time? Is it in approval applications? Is it in a working group? And then really break that down. So if a notary is saying, hey, in the last 2 weeks, I spent 20 hours. Okay, let's take a look at where that 20 hours is going. If it's approving applications, how many applications were reviewed? How many comments were left? If it was in the working group participation on Enterprise fil-plus, it's like, great, which applications were you working on and were you signing and were you going to those meetings? If it was commenting on those governance proposals, we'd love to see which governance proposals were important to this notary and what kind of comments were they leaving. So we're really digging into this data, and this is why this Airtable form is really helpful. And I'll talk about how we're pulling this data out in some of the future slides. But for you notaries that are on the call, this is really looked at. This is really kind of scrutinized for like, how are we building the best tooling? So if it does take you, 20 hours to review applications, what can we do to make that process faster and more efficient? So we really value the data. This is what it looks like for each notary. I've obviously blurred out who notary this is, but we can say like, okay, they did this fil-plus working group. They commented on these GitHub issues and we link it. And this is what I'm pulling when I send you guys your scores and DMs to say like, hey, this is what I see for your participation. Is this correct? And so thank you for going through that. Thank you for filling this form out. And again, as RJ said, it's really important because what we're looking for is active stewards of the community to govern this process and ensure the data is quality coming on board. So really, as notaries, we're relying on you to make that data review step. So for the participation, we've really been investing in this for the last few weeks. So I showed this slide. I think it's worthy to review it one more time because all notaries, when they applied in the 4th round, selected how much of a contribution would they like to make to the program. And this was really critical to some notaries being selected. If we had notaries that were of the same score and one notary chose a higher SLA participation over another notary, it would result in them being selected. So we're going to be very direct with notaries that selected L4 and L5 that might not be meeting those standards. This is what we've signed on for to have you in the program. If this is no longer a good fit for you, we can communicate that and see what steps we could take to make sure that you can still participate, but maybe not on the signing level. So again, the expectation of an L4 and L5 notary is that you're attending these governance calls, that you're part of at least the working groups, and that you're commenting on the proposals that come through. And of course, you're signing applications. So the L4s and L5s, they're meant to be the thought leaders. So if we post or we say there's an application that needs a signature, we could assume with great expectations that an L5 will jump on that right away and they'll be very familiar with what's expected of them. So L4s and L5 specifically will be helping and working with you directly to make sure that you know what's expected and we can support you with tooling. Or if this isn't a good fit, we can kind of graciously move you into a role that might be a better suit for you. So to look at that, what we've been doing is collecting the engagement for how a notary participates. So when you got the DMs from me last week, it essentially broken into these categories. So the first was working groups. So the way that I pulled working groups was I synced with RG as far as like, hey, who's active in coming to these trust and transparency working groups? Back on May 17th, RG posted in the private notaries channel hey, we're looking for you to self-report your participation in the working group. So what we did was we pulled everyone who had filled out this form and said, yep, they're active in the working group. Also, I looked in Slack and the Trust and Transparency dashboard for disputes, and any notary that participated in that, I pulled it. So if you were a notary and you got the resolution from me and it said, hey, I don't have any record of you being on one of these working groups, that's the reason why. Either you didn't fill out the survey, or we hadn't seen you on the calls, or you hadn't participated in the dispute resolution tracker. That's okay. This is a good way to kind of check in on what the expectations are for these working groups and kind of give you a forum. RG hosts a working group session. It happens the opposite week of this governance call, same general time frame. It's 30 minutes. They just discuss the open issues. He gets your feedback as the community on what's taking place. So it's a really great way to stay active on that group. We're kind of making a rule like, hey, if you weren't really sure on what goes into this, rather than being heavy-handed, we're just kind of checking in like, cool, if you are in the working group or if you did sign in, this is what were our expectations that we're looking for. So being very transparent, we'll follow up more with you in the coming days on like, hey, this is what we'd like to see is more participation. So that's kind of how we're pulling it. For GitHub engagement, this was a manual process. So what I did was I just went through all of the open applications in 2023 and I polled, hey, which notaries commented on these applications and which notaries left emoji feedback? As simple as a thumbs up, like, hey, a notary left a comment. I'm another notary. I agree with that comment. I left a thumbs up on it. So that's as simple as the GitHub. If I missed anything, thank you for you notaries that echoed back like, hey, Kevin, I was in also these applications. I added those to your score. Again, this isn't meant to be a got you. It's meant to be a check-in. Do we have the right metrics for you? Do you have the right metrics for us? So that's how the GitHub was calculated. For the governance calls, this is really straightforward. We just take the SLA from the Airtable signups. We total it up by each call. I have it on date range, and that's how the DMs, when I sent you, would say like, hey, I had you on these calls in January, February, and March. If you weren't on that SLA or you didn't come to the governance call, just let me know. And what we do is we take a print screen every week of like, hey, I can just go back to that print screen and find your name. This is a quick plug. So notaries, if you're listening to me, listen to me now. In your names, it's really helpful if you put the organization that you represent in your Zoom name. That way, if we do come back to a call and it's like 6 months later, we don't have any record of you signing this sheet, and you say you came to every call. If I come to Zoom and you dialed in from iPhone, it's really hard to verify. So if you look at my name, I just right click and say Kevin Filecoin Foundation. If you do the same for your notary organization, it makes it really easy to say I was on these calls and I was representing it. Another thing that it does is everybody who's on these calls or watching can see your organization represented. Makes it really helpful in a policy that's led by trust and it's led by reputation to have that listed. So again, I highly encourage you to change your name in Zoom so we could see it. If there was any missing governance calls, I've got your DMs. I'm working through that list. Thank you very much. And we'll add you into that. For the applications, this was as simple as we just pulled the number of applications that were reviewed in 2023, and we gave you the total. Hey, we had 6 applications that you reviewed. We had 50 applications. It was pretty clear cut. So if there's anything missing from that list, let us know. It could be that the bot that we used to pull was off, or there was another issue. We only took into account 2023 applications when the multi-sig was ratified. So what we're looking at is this year's applications. And that's really the heart of what a notary and what your responsibilities are, is how many of these applications are you reviewing, signing, and going forward. So this is a big part of that metric. And last was Slack. And the way that we kind of took this data was I looked at which notaries were commenting in the Slack boards, like, hey, someone asked a question, can we count on this notary to answer it and then give their perspective on what's going on? Incredibly helpful, as well as how long it takes a notary to write back. So for example, if I DM'd you last week, hey, here's the metrics that I have for your SLA participation, and I don't hear back for 2 weeks, well, that's okay, but that's going to be in line with one of the SLAs that might be a little bit lower. So like SLA for Slack on level 1 is 5 days. SLA for level 5 is like the next day. So we kind of looked at that as far as like, hey, how fast do you write back to these questions? Is this something that's like really checked often? Or is this just a once a week, once a month thing for you? So that's how the Slack was totaled on this one. So I'll pause and see if anybody has any questions as I continue to work through this list and update based off any feedback you gave. So feel free to unmute or comment directly in the chat. Well, if anything comes up, please let me know. And again, I'll just be updating directly with you guys in DMs. Again, the goal of this is to make sure that we're building a system that tracks correctly. So if anything is off, I've really appreciated you guys that have sent me screenshots. That was my favorite. Some of you, I said, I didn't have a record of the call, and you sent me a screenshot that you took of you on the call, which I thought was a very classy move. So thank you for that. So here's the timetables that we're looking at for this kind of SLA participation. Today is June 20th, and I don't think that we're ready to share all of these scores publicly because I'd like to get some more input from some of you notaries. So you can see that this date, this June 20th, I've scratched out to give notaries 3 days to kind of finalize all the updates that I've sent you, look it over, and make sure that everything's lined up. Once that finishes on June 23rd, in the private notaries channel, I'll be sharing, hey, this is the scores that we have for all the notaries, like who's active, who's inactive, who's kind of meeting this bar, what would totals come up. And this is a great way to kind of, again, build off that public reputation system so we can kind of see who are our top performing notaries for engagement and signing, and who are some of the notaries that are inactive and might not be participating in this program. On the timeline for like working with these notaries that might not be active anymore, we originally had said July 6th. For the timeline to remove those notaries. I'd like to give them as much time as possible. So the next notary governance call takes place on July 11th. So I've modified this date back 5 days to give an additional 5 days for any notaries that might not have been on this call or the last call. That next call will be the make or break. So we haven't seen you on any of the governance calls. We haven't had responses to the information that we've sent. This will be the time where we make a proposal. These XYZ number of notaries have been inactive. We are proposing to remove them from the multi-sig for failure to meet their SLA obligations. So that'll take place on July 12th. And again, the goal of pushing this back is to give those notaries who are inactive plenty of time to see the last call, to see this call, and see the next call, and really have clear expectations on what's expected of them and ability to meet that before they're removed. So if there's anything that takes place on that, please let me know. I'm going to pause and take a look at chat and see if there's anything that's come through. So a chat came through from Lena Mao. Thank you for this. The question is, I think this is only for current active notaries. Does it also work for new notaries? Great question. So the question is, does this participation work for new notaries as well as active? Lena, to answer your question, this is for existing notaries right now. If you are interested in becoming a notary in the 5th round, one, excellent that you're coming. I highly recommend that you sign that Airtable form and just say, hey, I'm a community member. When we go to look at notary scoring in the 5th round and we have new applicants that are coming, we take it into great account how they've been contributing in the program already. Do they have an existing reputation with the community? So yes, I would say you won't be worried about removal, but for your SLA, please sign that list, keep coming to these meetings, stay active in Slack. It's a great way to show the community as well as the existing notaries and the governance team that this is something that's important and vital to you. And it goes a long way. Really good question. Thank you. Next question I see from Josh. It's currently 66 notaries at L4 and L5 level. Is the final SLA level of notaries based on their own submitted workload, or does the governance team evaluate based on an objective information? That's a great question. So it's a little bit of both. So Josh, the way we look at this is if somebody is saying like, hey, I'm putting in 20 hours a week, but I don't see them coming to governance calls. I don't see them on the working groups. I don't see them in Slack. I don't see them on proposals, and they haven't signed any applications. Well, then that's, yeah, it's going to be a lot on the governance side. The flip side to this is if we have a newer notary that's coming to the meetings, that's commenting on Slack, that's active on these calls, but may not have signed as many applications as an existing notary, then yes, what I'll do is I'll look at that option, because obviously if they're a newer notary, maybe this is not as streamlined as a process for notaries that have been here since the 2nd or 3rd round. So it's very much a combination. And the reason why I'm looking at collecting this data from you is to make sure if there's any blockers. Like, Kevin, it takes me 5 hours to review an application. That's really good information to know, and that we don't want to make sure that we get it. But as far as like clear-cut metrics, is a notary coming to calls? Is a notary commenting on GitHub? Is a notary signing applications? Those are like specific metrics. Everything else will be fuzzy, and we'll try to work with the notaries like their working group. It's a really good question. Thank you for asking that. And then Faye, you asked about the SLA definitions. Great question. I'll come back to this again. So on the slide in the deck, essentially in slide 10, we talk about those SLA. The really goal of these SLAs is to sign applications and review data. So if we have somebody who's an L1, really the expectation of that notary is that they're going to be active, but not really driving change. But if you look at L4, if you look at L5, these are notaries that are involved in a lot of what's going on with the governance process around fil-plus. And the goal is that these notaries are really driving change for proposals, for creating issues and signing the data. So some of the definitions that we're looking for on these SLAs is you see how they scale. It goes from just being an active participant to really being a maintainer and thought leader as that goes forward. So as a refresher, slide 10 has the SLAs. And these were proposed back in GitHub proposal 630 before the 4th election that passed. So good question, Faye. Thanks for asking that. Pause and see if anybody has anything else, either in chat or in the Slack. All right. So notaries, if you're on the call right now, I want to remind you of a channel that's going to be really helpful for you. And it's the fil-plus-application-review in Slack. I highly recommend that you check this channel every day, every other day. It depends on your SLA level. If you're an SLA level 1, every 5 days. If you're an SLA level 4 or 5, maybe every day as you're just checking into Slack. And the reason for it is from time to time, requesters of data cap will say, hey, I filed this application. I haven't heard back. We wanted to give them a forum where they could reach out to you, the notaries, and connect and flag their issues and really have a forum. And this is the place they do it, fil-plus-application-review. Here's the link here, and I'll actually drop this here in chat so that everybody can make sure that it's on their bookmark. And what this will allow you to do is see the individuals that are actually highly communicative, Phil channel, and asking for data. So if you can see the screenshot that I grabbed, in the last maybe 9 days alone, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So 7 applicants who are like, hey, I filed an application. Please, I'd like to connect with the notary. Tell me what you need from me. So if you check this, this is a great way to be like, hey, I see your application. I'm looking at it now, or I have these specific questions I've left for you in GitHub. I haven't heard back. If you aren't relevant to your region, feel free to take it onto yourself and copy that application. We have our private notaries channel by region. So North America, Asia, Europe, and say, hey, this is a great one for you guys. And we could flag it as we go from there. So again, this is a real low-hanging fruit for highly communicative applicants who need their data looked at and they want to get the movement on it. I know sometimes as a notary, you might get an application, you might ask questions, and then no one writes back for a week, and then it's kind of difficult to come back. Typically, these ones are a great place to kind of come and make sure that you're reviewing as you go forward. I'll pause and see if anybody has any questions on this Phil application review channel. It's like a great place to find applications. Once you've filled out an application, remember in the registry, we did the onboarding. I'll repost that link on YouTube if you have any questions. It used to be as a notary, if you reviewed 10 applications and didn't sign any data, then, well, that time was really hard to quantify. Ever since we rolled out this new tooling in the registry, now when you review an application and you give a reason why you do not want to sign that data, this is a really easy way for you to show participation in the program, really doing your diligence without always having to sign. So if you review an application when you come into registry and you don't feel comfortable signing it, you could come into reason or your status and leave that comment, and this will help fill your metrics. So this way, if you review 10 applications and you only sign 1, if you leave feedback on the other 9 applications, this is a great way to demonstrate, hey, this week I looked at these 10 applications, I signed 1, the other 9s, I didn't feel that they were comfortable with my level of diligence, so I did not sign them. That is a great way to show that you're an active notary, what your thought process is, and we can give that feedback. So again, using this tool in the registry is a really critical way for you to demonstrate your metrics and demonstrate your participation in the program. And this will be looked at more and more as we start to work through these 400 applications. I know that the registry can be a little bit difficult to use. If there's 400 applications, it can sometimes be challenging to find applications that are top, that are responsive, and we're working on tooling. I think Simon's talked about the auto close verification if it goes longer than 14 days. I know that we're working on tooling to make this dashboard more searchable, and then working with the application review should make this process easier for you. So thank you again for working as we make the tooling more effective for you. But again, as a reminder, filling this out is one of the most powerful ways that you can show your signing data on it. So with that, I'm going to take a breathing, talking break and hand the floor over to RG. And if you guys have any questions on this at the end of the call, we'll go through it. RG, floor is yours. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Gary. I'll also invite Caro to discuss this specific issue, but essentially the retrieval bot is live. And so you might have seen, you might have seen the CID checker bot kind of flagging retrievability. I think this is a flag that the logic behind the retrieval bot is public. So if you haven't had a chance, please go take a look. Caro also dropped a Medium article which explains our approach to retrievability. This has been in the works for quite a long time. So we're happy to share the initial progress on this. And I'll let Caro add anything that she wants to, especially regarding the working group that she's leading as well.
Thanks, RG. This is super great. So yes, Retrieval bot is live, and in the past week or so, we have been piloting the algorithm. And I wanted to take this time and see if there's any community feedback on the Retrieval bot. I know I've been following some of the posts and threads on Slack, and one feedback I see is that the timeout is too short. It's currently 15 seconds, and I know that this might have raised some false negatives. So I would, Carrie, if I could take like 3 minutes here to see if anyone in this call wants to raise any feedback, or if you have any opinion on how long the timeout should be. If it's not 15 seconds, how long do you think the timeout, if the SP is not responding, should we categorize an SP or a data set as not retrievable? Okay, I got some feedback in the chat. "15 seconds is just fine. Anyone who feels otherwise?" All right. Well, this is the thread I've been following. I'll drop the thread to the link to the thread in our chat. If anyone wants to go have a look, or you can DM me directly if you have other feedback. Thank you so much.
There, RG, thank you. I think we're all looking forward to this, so really appreciate you guys coming on the call to talk. It's gonna be really nice. All right, proposals. So this is the first week in recent memory where we have no new proposals. So notaries on the call for the last 3 sessions, we've kind of gone over some of the new proposals. Those live here in the Notary Governance issues, and I'll post this link here in chat in case you don't have this bookmarked. But this is a great one just to check. Again, if you're coming into your SLA every week or so, this is a great way to come and see what is going on for the community. So anything that's been flagged that might change or modify or impact, we're trying to make this as transparent and open, as decentralized as possible. So if you come to this Slack link, you'll see all of the proposals that are being discussed. We talk about these on the call. We usually bring them up as soon as they're raised, give the forum just a little bubble up so you're aware of it. And then we give you a chance to comment on these calls. And then usually before we close them out, typically around a month to 6 weeks, we give a final call. Hey, is there any last thoughts? So leaving a comment here is a great way, one, to make your voice heard if you like something or don't like something, or two, to really drive home like, hey, I'm participating in this. So not only flagging a proposal, but just leaving a comment. Hey, I really agree with this thought, or this is a great proposal and it should be modified in this way. So we read all of these comments, we take them all into account. So you're really encouraged to take a look at these proposals async and fill out anything that's top of mind. So with that, if there's anything that you guys would like to discuss on any open or closed proposal, the floor is yours. Open forum for any conversations you might have on proposals. All right. Well, the last part of the call is I'll kick us off, but this is your time for any kind of community discussions. So I think what I'd like to kick the floor off, and I'm really looking to make this discussion, and I invite Galen, Deep, RG, Simon, Phil, KZ, any of the governance team on the line. We just wanted to talk a little bit about operational guidelines and how we view Slack and how we view the communications. So last week, as we posted, we had a member of the Slack board that was posting inappropriate content that, one, was in violation of the operational guidelines, and two, not really in line with how we're looking to have that decentralized Slack board. So I posted a reply on why that message was removed and how we take that into account. But I also wanted to open that forum up for any thoughts that you may have on that, and then also give some of the governance team a moment to kind of share their thoughts on how that works. So opening it up, anyone on the call, thoughts or discussion on how we're viewing Slack and what took place last week? Pretty clear cut. I thought there'd be a lot more discussion on that. Hey, RG, if you're on the call, can I trouble you to kind of talk a little bit about the post that you made this morning and make sure that that's like in the public record for everybody on the call this morning too?
Yeah, sure. So I think one of the issues that's been flagged multiple times in the past couple of weeks is regarding the governance team's position on storing public data sets. Now, I think for the longest time, and still we rely on notaries to do the due diligence and, make the decision on if a public data set has been stored previously, should they be receiving data cap again? There was a thread actually going on this past week discussing that, where I think a few of us made our input. We're going to discuss this internally, I think, in detail, but one of the things that we are leaning towards is asking clients for more details and explanation regarding if they're storing a data set that has been stored previously, why do they think that the data set should be receiving data cap? That might include explaining the data preparation. It also might include for them to take the responsibility to see if a data set has been stored previously. I think it's not that complicated as some people say it to be. I think if you find that a data set had been stored previously, and if you're looking to store it again, you just have to make sure that it's adding value to the network. And I think if you're a client who has been around for a while, I think it's not that difficult to understand, to make that decision of if it's adding value. I think so far, a lot of people know what are the different use cases that the Filecoin network enables. And so if you really think that a data set has been prepared differently that can have a use case from a compute standpoint, then yes, you're welcome to store that. And I think notaries will also be held accountable to the same standard. But yeah, I think I wanted to make that flag just to give the community a heads up that if you're a client or an SP who actively deals in public data set, then just make sure that you're taking the extra work, you're doing the extra work and taking the extra step to ensure that it's not a free rider. We don't run into the free rider problem, because I think we've seen a lot of traffic come through from like eFil-plus as well as public data sets in the past couple of weeks. And we want to make sure that both of the pipelines are held to the same standard, and one of the other is not an easier onboarding mechanism to the Filecoin network. So yeah, I think that's all I would like to say at this point.
Well said. Thanks, Arjun. Well, we have 20 minutes on the call. Open forum. If there's anything on your mind, anything we talked about or didn't talk about, floor is yours. All right. And as a closing thought, notaries on the call, I would pull your attention back to this, that in the next 3 days, we'll be taking all the comments from DM that you've updated, putting that into the tracker, and then sharing with you like, hey, this is the notary participation that we've seen. If we haven't seen anything back on July 12th, we'll take those steps to remove any active notaries that's not performing or communicating with the program. One last closing thought. RG, I see your hand up. Floor is yours before we wrap.
I just wanted to flag, I think in the past couple of weeks, I've seen a few notaries change their GitHub handle without informing either, the governance team. I think it's very important that you either inform us, because that definitely raises a flag if you're just changing your GitHub handle without, informing us, because we do, I think if you applied using a certain GitHub handle during the notary election process, and then you change that, that definitely, raises a flag. Because I've seen some really random notary names that I've never seen before pop up. And we just want to make sure that if there's a good reason for you to change the name, there might be a change in your organization. We're more than welcome to work with you on that, but please inform us if you need to change your GitHub handle. Yeah, just wanted to flag that.
Good last flag, RG. Thank you. All right, everyone. Thank you for coming to this call. If you need anything at all, let us know. Have a great day, great sleep, and we'll see you all the next call taking place. Cheers, everyone. All right. Well, big friendly hellos to you, and welcome to the second Notary Governance call of June 20th. We have a shortened agenda. We got done a little bit early on the first call, so I'll walk you through it. We should have plenty of time for anything you'd like to add. So starting off, we are dedicating most of this call's time to notary issues that are impacting just everything going on with that world. So we're going to dive deep into the activity review. So all of you received a DM from myself last week with, hey, these are the numbers that we're tracking. I'll walk you through where we pulled that numbers from, kind of keep you updated as this project unfolds and get any input you have. We'll talk a little bit about what makes a great notary, what we're looking for in terms of engagement, signing, behavior, and then we'll spend some time on application review tips. So there's some notaries in the program that have been coming to the calls, they're on the multi-sig, but they haven't reviewed an application. So just kind of giving them a friendly jump off to like, hey, here's where you find it, and here's what you do. And also collecting some of your feedback on how these calls are structured, how we can make this time more valuable for you and give you the best bang for your buck. For working group updates, RG or Carol will be on the call, hopefully. They'll walk us through the latest update on Retrieval and what they're doing with that process and how it's coming along. For proposals, there's no new issues, so we'll just kind of give you that time back. And under the discussion, we'll be talking briefly about how Slack communication works, and kind of talk briefly about the do's and don'ts of how we could use Slack to be effective. And again, if there's anything you'd like to see, we'll have plenty of time at the end to bake into the discussion. Or as always, feel free to shoot a hand up or comment in chat, and we'll come back to the issues that are on the phone. So with that, today is June 20th. There is not a call on July 4th. July 4th is a holiday in the States, so we'll be off. That 4th will be an off week, and calls will resume on July 11th. If you follow these meetings with the governance calls, those should auto update in your calendars, but just as a friendly reminder before we go into it, there is no governance call on July 4th, and it will resume the following week on July 11th. If there was any topics that you wanted to see on that agenda, I'll make a GitHub issue. Feel free to write a simple comment. Kevin, can we please discuss X, Y, and Z? And I'll be sure to bake it in. Or feel free, if you'd like to DM me directly and say, can you please add this to the agenda? This is our time, so whatever you'd like to see, feel free to include it. If there's any support you need, this is the governance team. We're here to help you. We're here to help the program. So feel free to reach out to any of us in our respective domain areas. If you're not sure who to reach out for, send me a friendly DM. I'll be happy to route you to the best POC or help if any kind of communications stalled. With that, I'm going to turn the floor over to Simon, who's going to give us a brief update on the coming survey. Simon, floor is yours, buddy.
Thanks, K-Ray. Hi, everyone. Just a quick announcement. The governance team is preparing to send out the June survey in order to gather some feedback from the community regarding how we're currently doing during the fil-plus quality phase. We'd really appreciate you all taking some time to give us your input. So please look out for the survey. We'll be sending it out on Slack. Just a little bit more on the survey itself. It'll just give us a better understanding of how aligned the community is with the overall program. Essentially, this information is just going to help us understand what direction the program should be going towards and how we can improve it. Again, all of your inputs are incredibly important. So please make sure to take some time to filling it out. The survey should be going out by the end of this week. So thank you.
Well said. Short and sweet, Simon. I love that, man. All right, jumping right into notary issues for you. The first one has to do with how we do this call. So I got some feedback on DM, and I thought it was really good feedback. And it was, hey, Kev, I come to these calls, but English is my second language or not my primary language. And I have a little bit of a difficult time engaging live. So I usually watch the videos with subtitles on YouTube. Is there anything we can do to solve this? So yes, what we're doing is right now we're scoping vendor options that have plugins. So as this live call happens, there will be a translation that goes on it. So I'd like to kind of get some feedback from those of you on the call. Would it be helpful to have translations that took place live on this call? Feel free to unmute or feel free to just use the chat. Any feedback on translation live? All right, in chat, we have 3 issues. Fatman, no, I'll share that link in just a moment. You have not missed it. And then I see a thumbs up from you, Patrick, and Danny. That's a big thumbs up too. So I think that's more than 0. So I'll look into it. It can't hurt. If we try it out and it's not a value add, I'll just stop the service. So, okay, I'll look into that and I'll echo back. And as a reminder, if you do watch this on YouTube, we translate this into every language that goes forth. So feel free to click that closed caption at the bottom and it will open up whatever language you have. All right, here's what you're looking for, Fat Man. I'm going to post in chat right now, and that is the SLA to the Airtable form. So I'd like to talk about this now as you fill this out or as you watch on how we use this data. So essentially, when you come to this notary governance call and we kind of share ideas, we kind of make sure that you're tracking the proposals, direction, and roadmap, we ask that you report how many hours you've been dedicating. So in the screenshot that I have here, you could see somebody who's come to like the governance calls in January and February, which session they came to. Then they self-report how many hours are in the program. This is helpful for 2 reasons. The first is it lets us on the governance team see where you as notaries are having to spend your time. So for example, in this top choice on the 31st, they spent 18, 20 hours on approving applications, on going through the reviews, on the enterprise field working group. So that tells us maybe we can work on the tooling to make it more effective, or maybe we should work on the onboarding process or training to make this a smoother process. So rather than spending 20 hours reviewing applications, we can get this down to a lower number, and either you spend that time with more applications or not so much. So when you fill this out, that's another really helpful thing for us. Another thing that I do with that is if we see, hey, 18, 20 hours, we also look, okay, how many applications was this person able to review? Was it 1 or 2? And that tells us, okay, it's taking them around 5, 6 hours on a single application. Is this something that we can help with, or is this something we can come back and review the data? So when you fill this Airtable out, this is really the goal, is that we can make sure that the governance team is giving you what you need to be successful in this program, and we can scale it without requiring too much of your time going forward. So that link is right there in chat. I will also say, when I was sending out the DMs on participation, there was quite a few that were like, hey, I came to many more calls than you had. It gets really tricky. So right now we're taking a stance like, hey, if you came, we're not going to be sticklers about it, but we are going to be more going forward. One of the things you can do is that if you look in the chat of who's on the call right now, some people have their name, like Kevin Filecoin Foundation. What I'll do is I'll grab a print screen of everyone on the call. And that way, if in 3 months, 6 months, we do this again, you're like, hey, I was on the call, I'll just come back to these print screens. And what's what I do? And I can say, great, what was your username on the call? It gets really difficult if you're dialing in from like iPhone or just one first name. So I'd highly recommend you can rename in Zoom and say, hey, my name is Kevin from Filecoin Foundation. And that's just one more way to kind of add to your participation. And again, as a reminder, this program is built on trust and reputation. So if you're taking the time to come to this call, it's a really good way, if you are asking questions or commenting, that we can see who you are and tie that back to applications, storage providers. So again, thank you for joining. That goes a long way, and your Retrieval form is right there. Right. So with the SLA participation, last week I sent you all DMs and I totaled up essentially how much participation we've seen in the program. And like I said on the last call that took place, we currently have 86 notaries that are on the multi-sig, and 66 of those notaries signed up in their application to be L4 and L5. Now, why we're looking at this is we're not seeing a lot of activity from those L4 and L5. That activity is vital with so many open applications that are awaiting a notary review. So if someone signed up to be an L4 and L5, their application scored higher in the notary election. So we want to make sure that we're doing right by folks that might not have been selected because they didn't sign up for these higher, and then kind of hold the bar high for those folks that signed up for these higher SLA levels. So as a refresher, if you're an L4, if you're an L5, the expectation is that you're participating on a regular basis, that you're active, that you're partaking in the working groups, that you're commenting on Slack, that you're filling out applications. So I'll be following up and totaling the scores, and I'll talk about that as we go through. This is kind of the reason why. Do we have notaries that may have signed up, this wasn't a good fit for them, and we can maybe usher them into another role or another assignment that might not take on so much that they might not be able to have. So the way that I'm calculating this notary engagement for everyone is based off these categories that were specific to that application 880. The first is working groups. So when I messaged you and I said, hey, I saw you were in this working group, or I didn't see any activity in working group, what I took that from was the message that RG posted on May 17th, where he asked all notaries to kind of self-report. Are you still in this trust and transparency working group? Then what I did was I went through the dispute resolution tracker. I went through all the trust and transparency proposals that were filed and saw who issued and left comments. And I looked at those 3 things and factors. So if you didn't fill out that survey, if you had never gone to one of the trust and transparency calls, or you had never left a comment on any of the trust and transparency proposals, I didn't mark you as participating in that group. So I'll be following up with just a handful of you that were like, hey, I was active in this, just to see if I might be missing something, or might be able to share a little bit more of what the expectations are for that working group. The second was GitHub engagement. What I did was I went through every proposal that was filed in 2023. So this could be trust and transparency, this could be any kind of addition to the program. And I just manually took an export of everyone who commented or left an emoji. It could be as simple as a thumbs up, like, hey, someone left a comment, I liked it, thumbs up. That was that simple. And I just totaled that. And when that total came through, I would add it up. Okay, we had 7 GitHub comments, we had 1 GitHub comment, we had 12 GitHub comments. I left that for you. There was a couple of notaries that wrote back and said, hey, this number doesn't work well. Thank you. That's what I was hoping that you would say. Some of you changed your GitHub handle. We didn't tackle the old ones. Thanks. Great feedback. Fixing it now. Some of you might have left comments on different things where you missed it entirely. So that's why I really appreciated those of you that responded in Slack. I'm still working. I got about maybe 300 Slack messages over the course of the weekend. I'm burning through them as fast as I can today to get back to you all shortly, probably by end of day tomorrow. So I appreciate that. If I missed anything on your GitHub, please let me know. For governance calls, I took that survey. It was pretty straightforward. I just took the Airtable data that everyone had been filling out for the last year. I sum totaled it by what calls you came on, and I gave that back. There was quite a few that said, hey, I was on this call, I didn't get registered. Again, I'm kind of taking the approach like, if this is that important, I trust you, I want you to be successful in this. So I'm updating those scores based off that. Going forward, if the form isn't filled out and we can't see you on the camera or anything like that, it's going to be a lot more difficult to kind of give you credit for coming to these. So if you are taking the time, please remember to fill that out in chat. I'll post it at the end of the call. Pretty straightforward on that. And again, I'll update if we missed it. I'm going to believe you guys and make sure that we get it for you. For applications, this was a big one and probably one of the highest that we're looking at for the participation. The governance calls, the proposals, the working groups, all of those feed into signing applications and reviewing applications. So this is an important one. We have quite a few notaries that have been active joining these calls, but haven't signed any applications. So that's one of the questions that I'm asking as I reach out is that, hey, I see you on the calls. I see you in the GitHub. What's blocking? Is it an onboarding? Is it a training thing? Is it a worry that it might be reviewed? I'm trying to unblock that for you. And then lastly, it's Slack. There's a lot of really positive dialogue that happens in Slack, and we'll talk about this on the call. So just as a refresher, this is where those SLA metrics are coming from. This is what we're looking for. And those all kind of feed back to like, what can we do to make sure that the applications are moving quickly and quality as they go through them. So I'll pause and see if anybody has any questions on how this is working or their specific situation as we go. All right, if anything comes up, we can always come back. Here's where we stand with that. So we kind of announced this on June 6th last month. And over the last week, you got the DMs from me like, hey, this is what we saw. We're going to be sharing that probably in about 3 days. And that 3 days just comes down to me. I really underestimated how much I'd be manually changing this. So 3 days is to buy me time to make sure that everybody is 100% accurate. I'll be sharing the list of names of notaries that might be in that bottom tier. These are notaries that had no participation, no active engagement, really hadn't met their L4 and L5, and just kind of give them one last chance to kind of echo back, see if there's a problem, out of office, and make sure that we're not doing anything rash. Once we share that publicly, we'll share this in the notary channel, so you can kind of see where you stack rank against all the other notaries as far as participation and application signed. This is kind of what's in the leaderboard, but a lot more tactical for you. And you can kind of see like, hey, based off other notaries, I'm signing in the top percentage or the bottom percentage. Those notaries that have engagement that does not meet their SLA levels. For example, if they sign up to be a 5, but they've come to only 1 or 2 calls, they've signed no applications, and they've done nothing to kind of rectify that based off these communications, we'll be opening up a proposal to remove those notaries from signing. They'll still be invited to maintain their notary status. They'll still be allowed to remain on the calls. They'll still be allowed in the channels. They'll still have full access to the notaries, but by not meeting their SLA level requirements, the proposal will be to remove them from signing data applications until there's a chance to review this in the next round of elections. So this kind of does carry a lot of weight for any notaries that might have gone inactive, making sure that we're keeping this high standard going. So again, this is meant to be an opt-in for those that want to maintain their roles in the program. And those that don't, this is meant to be a quiet offboarding so that they can focus on whatever they're working on and come back when they're ready to make an impact in the program. So that updates will be coming through in this week on the 23rd. And then that proposal will go out for removal after the governance call on the 11th, giving them ideally 3 governance calls to kind of come, hear all this, and make sure that they're tracking that place. So kind of pause again and see if anybody has any questions on this part. Right. So if you're a notary on this call and you're on here now and you're like, hey, I am a notary. I'm obviously here right now. I want to maintain my notary status, but I haven't found any applications to sign or that was a good fit. I'm talking to you right now. Here's what I would recommend. There is a Slack channel called fil-plus-application-review. And we encourage data applicants to go post their application to try to get on your attention or your radar. And they would say, just like the screenshot, if any notaries can see this, please look at my application. There's no vouch, there's no recommendation. This is just any applicant who wants to try to fast track. And as a notary, you could assume that if anybody's posting in this channel, you have one more way to reach them. Sometimes it can be frustrating if you leave a comment on a GitHub application, then they wait 2 or 3 days to write back. Now you have to then go back and keep track and go for it. So a lot of these applicants in the Fill application review, you can chat with them on Slack, ask them some of your diligence questions in Slack on how they're going to store the data or what they may be doing with it, what their retrieval process is. You can do that in Slack or GitHub. And it's a really effective way to really get in touch with people that might be trying to fast track this. So if you're a notary and you've been looking for something to sign or really communicate, I'd recommend starting out in that fil-plus-application-review. I admit, as we work on that registry tooling, there's 400 applications in there, so it can be quite daunting to just grab one at random. So this is a really effective way for you. I highly recommend all notaries take a look at that. And then as far as if you are doing your diligence, one of the things that we're able to pull now is diligence in process. Some of the feedback that we got last quarter was, hey, I'm a notary. I might review 5, 10 applications, and I don't want to sign for their application. It doesn't meet my bar. And I might leave a comment, but I'm not getting credit for that review. Really good feedback. So Phil built in tooling that you can see in the registry for the updated reason on why you signed or why you did not. We're able to export this metric for applications. So you might sign 1 application, but review 6. Now you can get credit for all 7 by just leaving a note. Hey, this didn't meet my standards, or person not communicate. All those drop downs are available in that list. So if you are going through the registry, when you fill this out, that's the reason why. It's a really helpful metric. It lets us see what these applications are looking like and then give you the credit you deserve for the work you put in the program. So registry is a really effective way as you go through to kind of get credit, fill that out. That's a really good way as you go through. So that was a lot as far as what we're doing on the metrics review, what we're doing with the activity, the Fill Plus applications channel. Does anybody have any questions on that process or anything they want to flag or any areas of concern? Right. Hey, Simon, RG isn't on the call, and I'm sure everyone would like a break from my voice. Simon, would you feel comfortable talking to retrievals, or would you rather me kind of talk about that tonight?
Yeah, so I think Shinon is here today, and he's gonna take it over.
Oh, I love that. Shinon?
Yeah, sure. Actually, okay, so this part, so this is how it's coming from Carol. But what we did is that we're actually putting all the logic of how retrieval works in the below GitHub repo. So you can check. It's supposed to be transparent. So you can check the code. You can also check the logic, how we are doing the retrieval, and make a comment here all over the GitHub issue. So the purpose of it is just make sure every retrieval logic is transparent. You get to optimize your own storage provider systems according to those logic. You can also feel free to run your own retrieval testing and make sure your clients or your store providers are serving high quality retrievals. Another update I want to provide is, so there is a feedback from the community in the fil-plus channel. I think the person's name is Gavin Zhao. So Gavin, if you are here, feel free to express your opinions. Otherwise, I can try to represent you. Okay. So his opinion is about, he has some opinion about the timeout set in the retrieval bot. So the retrieval bot is having a default timeout of 15 seconds. If it fails to dial the peer or it fails to download a single block of data from that peer, then it's considered a retrieval timeout. gave us opinions that for a system that's costing 3 hours for sealing, that time is too short, and he suggests increase the timeout to 5 minutes. Also, he made a point that the retrieval should not just be a cutoff between non-retrievable and retrievable. It should be like a grayscale, like non-retrievable, poor retrieval quality, high retrieval quality, and like that. So my opinion is that for HTTP retrieval, it's really a bad experience to have like a 5 minutes of wait time before the user receive a single block of data from an HTTP provider. And also, so my opinion is that we can consider increase it, but 5 minutes is just too long for as a regular HTTP timeout. So we really wonder what's the opinion from other notaries, and hopefully we can reach a conclusion of what should be the ideal timeout for retrieval.
Oh, Shinan, that's great. Sounds like you got yourself a little assistant there with you in the background too. It's lovely.
Yes.
I see a hand from Danny. Danny, floor is yours.
Yeah, I think you're both right, but I think the deal here probably is we don't really know what the average for retrieval is right now. I agree that that's probably pretty slow if people are expecting a fast retrieval, but I know a lot of solutions that back stuff up onto Filecoin cache that data. So I guess my suggestion, as long as it doesn't make things too complicated, is leave a pretty long timeout, but record that in the reputation, right? Like I don't know whether you're going for a single figure or a report, but something that shows how fast or how slow it is, and make that a scalar, a variable, rather than a true false value.
Hey Gary, I just popped in. I know Shinan's in here as well. We are tracking time to first byte, Danny, so we should have performance stats coming in. But in general, yes, I think this data will get richer over time. We're also interested in eventually doing sampling and facilitating the actual checking of the data itself. I think where we're starting out, though, is like an extremely rudimentary baseline that is a little bit more of like was a sub piece or a sub component even retrievable, because retrieving the entire piece is not efficient. And so it's like finding like a sub block and being like, yep, could we even get this? Because what we're actually observing right now is that things fail at the configuration level, let alone the actual retrieval. And so this is like low hanging fruit where it's like, hey, you're choosing to work with SPs that are not even basically configured correctly to serve your needs. Why are you continuing to work with them? Shouldn't you be working with people that are configured to actually serve this data to others in the world?
Yep, that makes sense. I guess I would err on the side of a longer retrieval period, just because what we're trying to clarify here is like whether it's retrievable at all, not how fast it is. If that's what we're sort of starting from, and then we're building up from that.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. I think we'll have to, not only should we do that probably, but we probably need to do a bunch of like post analysis as well on like what were really good indicators or good like points at which we could have a high confidence estimate on this. And so I think as configuration stuff gets sorted and we go on an actual SP ramp up campaign to get those guys in shape overall to be able to serve this stuff correctly, we learn a lot more too and have to tune these things. But yeah, I think your intuition I agree with.
Nice.
So how about setting like a timeout to a middle ground, some between 15 seconds and 5 minutes, something like a 1 minute? Because increasing the timeout will actually reduce our throughput, because if a longer timeout for each testing thread, that means we need to spin up more workers working on it, which increases the cost we have right now. So something like, but I also hear that maybe a longer time does help. So I propose just increase it from 15 seconds to 1 minute. Would that be, what do you think?
I think you could do that. We could even do 30 seconds, Shinan. It might be interesting to actually look at the number of times we see timeout though, and see if that actually changes. Because if it turns out that doesn't actually happen and you just consistently see the same amount, then we know that increasing the duration didn't change that much, right?
Yeah, that makes sense. Sounds good.
Yeah, I think there's like two errors you get. One is like you're not getting any reply at all, and then another would be kind of hanging. But yeah, sorry.
Gotcha. I got what's made. Yes.
Mark, I see your hand up. Floor is yours, Mark.
Cool. So I think this is great. It's like moves us towards a direction of like actually data coming out of the File Plus program. I'm curious if there is any thought around, so obviously some data is going to be requested a lot because it's valuable data. And what we'll probably recognize over time is that there's a lot of data in File Plus that's never being requested. And I guess I'm wondering is, over time, do we start to push for data that's actually being used by people for the File Plus program? I don't know if anyone can comment on that or.
Do you mean in terms of like? Do you mean overall in terms of like at this stage of like who do we give data cap to, or do you mean in terms of taking results from like real retrieval serving end users?
Okay, so I guess maybe for some context, I'll give a bit of my concern at the moment has been when I've done applications is that there's no real client associated with some of these data sets. So we're moving data onto the Filecoin network. And what we're going to realize over time is that data is as good as junk data because no one really wants it there. And so I'm looking at something like this is like, okay, this is good. This at least shows that the storage providers are storing the data and able to give out the data if it's requested. But I'm wondering, well, the next step is that if the data is never being requested, does that stay in the File Plus program?
Oh, that's really interesting. So this is like a renewal case effectively, right? Like, can you extend? So to interpret that from like a technical standpoint, I would state that as if somebody never retrieves data that was stored with data cap, is there any point in allowing those data cap allocations to be extended or the claim terms to be extended? So an SP.
Yeah, that's more or less where I'm getting. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's really cool. Very interesting point. I think worth talking about, a little out of scope for this specific piece.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I think very valid concern. I guess the question is, like enforcing that is really interesting because both the client, so theoretically a client can extend the terms if they'd like up to 5 years as part of getting data cap upfront. So that feels like it's a little bit priced in because they don't have to expend new data cap for this. But if it's not the original client extending the terms, right? If an SP comes or a different client comes and gets data cap for it, it could be extremely interesting to build tooling that looks at like how net new data cap is used between new CIDs being onboarded versus existing CIDs having their allocation terms extended. And in the case of the allocation term being extended, we could look at like what those CIDs were and what utility they provided over time. The problem with all this is that retrievals themselves don't end up on chain. So you don't have like a objective way to prove whether or not something was retrieved, but it could still be useful to get a view into that in a different way, like constructing a different, L2 protocol, looking at like public stats published by retrieval markets, right? Like Saturn and things like this, they will all have stats on what's being retrieved. And so we could find a proxy for this and start out by making that part of how you judge quality or how you even make somebody eligible to get data cap. Because if it turns out they're just spending it on extending deals that are serving no value, then should they continue to get data cap? Probably not. And eventually that could make its way into the protocol too, where like you could have automated notaries that never give data cap to people that just use it to extend claim terms for data cap allocations that seemingly upload PCIDs that are never retrieved in any retrieval market, right? Like that like logical flow could be constructed. We're probably a ways away from that, but it makes sense.
Yeah. I think if you think about it as a subsidy, if the data sets are providing a lot of value, then it makes sense for FilePlus to kind of subsidize that data set. And if it's only providing value to one client or no clients in some cases, then maybe the subsidy shouldn't be there. Maybe it should be reorientated to those more valuable data sets. So yeah, I understand there's a lot of challenges there, but yeah, definitely I feel like something worth working towards.
Yeah, I do like the idea though overall. If you don't mind, putting this either in the discussion topic for the current retrieval thing or spawning a new one. This feels like something we need to come back to maybe in like a month or so and talk about some potential next steps. There's significant maturation that needs to happen in how retrievals are tracked, indexed, and like how we can interplay with real retrieval requests to gateways. But it feels like a reasonable thing to think about.
Yep. Josie, thanks, Steve.
Shinon, if you're still here, there's two questions in chat. Maybe I'll punt them over to you. The first one comes from Fatman. He's just curious, what's your status? Are you part of PL now? And the second is the timeout setting on Retrieval. If you feel comfortable talking about those.
So yes, I'm now part of PL since last August. I didn't get the same question. Oh, Retrieval. How about Retrieval timeout setting? So right now it's set to 15 seconds for all protocols. I don't get what that question is exactly asking. Are you asking for whether those can be customized or? Oh, okay. So actually that's Gavin Zhao. So he's asking how about retrieval timeout settings? Could you expand a bit more? Okay. So maybe we can take this question offline. The current decision is that let's just double and or quadruple the timeout setting and see if the retrievability improves. If not, that basically indicates a longer timeout doesn't really help with retrievability.
Right. Thanks, Shinon. Gavin, if you're on the call and you want to echo back more, please let us know. Shinon, where's the best place if people want to follow up with this? I know Caro shared that link to the Slack in the past. If you
So Bobby, so the person asking the question, which is Gavin, he's aware of the discussion because he started a discussion. So we can continue discussing this topic in the thread we have in fil-plus channel.
Sounds great. Shinon, thanks as always for joining and speaking to that. We appreciate it. Deep joining to provide that. All right. There were no new proposals. One of the first of 2023. So kind of using this time, notaries on the call, I'm going to drop the link for the proposals in GitHub. As a friendly reminder, we look at this as far as like participation, as well as like what direction this program is taking. So these proposals are filed by the governance team. They're filed by members of the community. They deal with everything from trust and transparency to diligence proposals to tooling modifications that come through here. So if you can look, you can see some of these proposals have comments that tie back to them. Again, this is looked at notary engagement and participation, as well as what direction is this program taking? So if you have thoughts, we're asking you to please take a look. It can be as simple as an emoji. Hey, I really like this comment that's already been left. It doesn't have to be a whole thesis on it. Or, hey, I have objections to this. I'd like to see this discussed in the next governance call for these reasons. So if without your feedback goes along, we'll typically bring one of these proposals up on a governance call. We'll give it a cycle to kind of leave comments in it. And then after about 6 weeks or so before we close it out, we'll bring it up one last time as a final review to share with you what direction it's going. So please take a look if you haven't done so already with the issues of the movement. All right, this is open time for anything that's on your mind. Is there anything that anybody would like to discuss or flag or bring up?
jump in if I can, Kevin.
Please, floor is yours.
People are probably sick of my voice too. I'm trying to understand where eFile Plus is up to. I don't know if the other Kevin or anyone here has an idea. Like, is it out of pilot phase yet, and clients can start onboarding through that program?
Yes.
It is. Okay.
Even if it weren't out of pilot phase, you would still be able to use it. The point of the pilot phase is basically to gauge how much throughput it would have, so we could test for a couple of things and be like overtly transparent about takeaways. So in theory, like KG, I think limited the total number of applicants that were coming in at some point to 10. But at this point, because of the changes we made to the upper bound of 15 bibs for LDNs and explicitly stating that people that are onboarding more should come into eFil Plus, I think, if you've got like clients that are onboarding private encrypted data, please start funneling applications through eFil Plus.
Yeah, and is there like a minimum amount? Minimum amount of data for eFile Plus. Like, when do you go through eFile Plus? When is it?
In theory, no, but I would claim that like for anything under like a couple hundred terabytes, let's say a couple hundred terabytes, including replication. So like unique 50 TIBs or less, your time is better spent just finding an individual notary to work with. So that's more of like a payoff thing. But like as soon as you cross, including replicas and everything, if you cross half a bib, I feel like just coming in through eFil Plus LDN makes more sense.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Thanks for that.
Great question, Mark. Young, I saw your hand. Is there anything that was still on your mind or you wanted to flag?
Yes, I got a question. The notary, I'm just wondering what is a good retrieval success rate to sign a application. I read the Medium this week. It says a bad client is one that has less 1% retrieval success rate, but that means if a client has a retrieval success rate more than 1%, that means we can sign this application.
Young, that's a great question. Deep, can you field that while I dig up that article? Otherwise, I'll take a crack and I'll try to multitask it as we go.
Hey, I'm sorry. I was reconnecting to my Wi-Fi and cut out. I just heard you say, Deep, can you feel that? Do you mind if I request a restate of the question?
Yeah. Young, would you mind saying that one more time for Deep while I dig up that article for everybody on the call?
Okay, maybe my network is not as good.
No, it's not you, it's me. I was just changing Wi-Fi. It's me.
Okay. I'm just wondering, what is a good retrieval success rate to sign a application? I just read the Medium, Carol Tsai published. It says a bad client is one that has less 1% retrieval success rate. Does that mean if a client has a retrieval success rate that more than 1%, so the notaries can sign the applications?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So I think it depends, and I think that the number will change over time. I think that right now these numbers are extremely low because people don't have configuration set up correctly. They're not using the right tools. The retrieval testing software itself is undergoing various improvements and changes. And so I think at this point in time, the threshold is extremely low. Maybe 1% is a good number, but I think that number will continue to change and hopefully increase. So let's make it a point to continue this as an ongoing topic where we discuss the percentile range and the current thresholds that make sense. Now, in terms of your actual question, on should a notary say yes to anything that has a higher success rate than 1%. I don't think the answer is simple, or I don't think the answer is just yes. I think retrievability is one factor in many factors that notaries are looking for. And so I think you would probably want this to be the case, but you would also want other things, right? You want to make sure the CID distribution looks good. You want to make sure that the client is giving you enough information about themselves that you feel like you can trust them and the work that is being done. And I think if a client is able to land these things, then yes, it makes sense. However, just this data point alone today, I doubt it is enough to justify a decision one way or another. That's my opinion. I mean, I think it would be good to hear from some other notaries on the call.
Okay, I got it, because a lot of notaries got in trouble because of the applications they signed. The retrieval success rate is really low. So I'm just wondering if there is a criteria to sign this application to avoid any dispute. Okay.
It's a good question. I would open this up and deep asked it. Does any notaries on the call have a metric that they're personally using for this, not just the 1%? Young, it sounds like you hit on a good question. We're definitely going to address this, push out some recommendations. That way it's not so ambiguous. It's more clear cut, as Steve said. Thank you for raising it. I had one thing I just wanted to put out there into the ecosystem. It was about communications in Slack. So I just wanted to kind of address, last week we had a member of the community in Slack post that they were essentially giving away free data cap, which is a violation of some of the terms of service and the operational guidelines. We had RG who reached out to them, kind of got a feel for like what was going on, what was their reason, and just kind of flagging that this was not allowed behavior, and the post was taken down. I wanted to stress, like, this is the unusual, it's not the norm. The intent of the Slack and the whole program that we're all involved in is to be a decentralized network where it doesn't really have this layer of like management, quote unquote. But there are times where like the community needs to have someone that can step in and to make sure that there's no violations. So because that post specifically violated the TOS for the operational guidelines, it was taken down. But the goal of that Slack, of these calls, that it's all distributed, that it can have anybody's voice that goes through it. So just want to kind of stress that on the line, that that board is meant to be a community forum, whether it's the fil-plus channel, whether it's the notaries channel, or whether it's the regional notaries channel. They're meant to be facilitating to make sure that the network runs, and we hope that it operates in a clean fashion. Sometimes someone will post like an application review. Hey, can you please look at my application, notaries? And they'll post that in the fil-plus channel. Usually what I'll do is I'll DM them and say, hey, politely, can you post this in the fil application channel and take it down? And then they self-regulate that as a go forward. So again, I wanted to stress, it's not normal that we take down a post. We consider it very much the exception of the rule if it's a clear violation of how that policy stands. But if anybody had any questions or wanted to discuss that, this is a great forum, or anything else that's on your mind as one last call. Well, with that, let's say a big warm thank you. As a friendly reminder, there's no governance call on July 4th. July 11th is the next governance call. The Google Calendar is updated. If you need anything else, please reach out. In Notaries, I'll be finalizing all of those metrics that you sent me tomorrow and tonight, and you'll get those finalized listings before we make it public to make sure it's 100% correct based off your records. Thank you again for all you do. Thank you for coming to this call. We'll see you guys online. Cheers.